Hi everyone, my name is Katie Novak and I'm going to be your presenter for this short video here. And I think that it's important that you know that recent research on the length of time someone will commit to a video is rather sobering, I guess, if you're used to presenting videos, because they say that the average viewer can pay attention for 2.5 minutes before needing to really reflect or think about something or to interact with someone. And at best you can look at 6 minutes. And so, it's kind of tricky when you're trying to create a video that's maybe 15 minutes long to know that it needs to be broken up a little bit. Otherwise, you're going to have people kind of, staring around and looking for something else to do. So I'm going to do my best here to keep your attention and to give you an opportunity every couple of minutes to really reflect and to think about something and how it relates to your practice. A little bit about me. I'm the Assistant Superintendent of Schools in the Groton-Dunstable Regional School District in Massachusetts. And I'm a .8, and so I do that work 208 days a year. And for the rest of the time, the other 52 days, I have an amazing opportunity to work with CAST. They invented UDL, and I get to travel kind of internationally and work with teachers and administrators around the world who are looking to transform education for all students. And that's what UDL is really about. It's about really changing the narrative of how we teach students. And so when we're thinking about that, a lot of the questions are, well, what does that mean? What is UDL and why is it important? And how do you do it? And today we're going to talk about really why it's so important using some analogies. And again, I want you to know, I think it's important to know that I am still a practicing leader in education. And so it's not that I go around and consult and I'm just reading the research all the time, but 4 days a week I spend with my colleagues who really allow me to keep it real. We've created a really amazing collaborative relationship where it's all about, this is why it's important and let's try it and let's support each other. And then they'll come back to me and let me know what's effective and what's not effective. And so over time, I really have an opportunity to kind of craft this message and make sure that it's as relevant as possible. So we're going to talk a little bit about our objectives kind of for this work. And we're going to be creating a couple different analogies here. And these analogies are going to be getting you to think about what it means to transform education. So when you think back to your graduate program for a minute, or when you were in college, or in the professional development, often we really think about the fact that teaching and learning is about what we are doing as teaching. And John Dewey said something amazing back in the early 1900s where he said, teaching and learning is almost like selling and buying. Like, you can't say that you sold something if nobody bought it. And in the same way, you can't say that students are, or that you are teaching if students are not learning. So it's really the wrong lens. In traditional education, we think about when we walk into classrooms, we're always looking at what is the teacher doing. And UDL is kind of transforming that and saying we need to walk in and look at what are the students doing. It's not so much about the role of the teacher, but what opportunities is a teacher creating so students can become something called expert learners. And that's what UDL is really about. It's about teaching students not to be good students, not to be compliant, not to be able to just give back knowledge, but how can we really get them to engage in their learning? And to do that, I want to give you a couple of analogies. So this first analogy is just the ice cream truck analogy. And I'm going to play some music for a second that's going to bring you back. It doesn't want to cooperate, so I guess, oh, here it comes. So if you hear that music, okay, it's like this really exciting sound for a lot of children who have an opportunity to go to an ice cream truck. And the idea is that an ice cream truck serves all different things. There's not only options, but there's choices. And this is really an important distinction, because when you go up to an ice cream truck and you see the bomb pop and you see popsicles and you see ice cream sandwiches, okay, you know that you also have a choice. Now, what happens a lot of times in education is we might have options. So one day you might show a video, another day students may do a poster, another day, students may be, taking a test, a traditional multiple choice test. And so you have options, but students never have a choice. So it's kind of like walking up to an ice cream truck and seeing those options, and then the ice cream truck is saying, well, today we're only going to serve popsicles, or today we're only going to serve ice cream sandwiches. And there's other options out there. And so what it really comes down to is, what is the goal of an ice cream truck? A goal of an ice cream truck is to make money. And so we can provide choices. We have the same opportunity to do this in education, because our goal is to make sure students meet our standard. And our standard is actually far more flexible than we realize. So for example, if you teach, anything based on writing, whether it's history or science or ELA, whether you're asking students to respond to text in a traditional way, like reading a story and then writing a response to it, or viewing a painting and responding to it, or listening to a composition and responding to it, a lot of the times we think back to, I need all students to write an essay. And that's kind of like saying you all need to have a popsicle. Because there's a lot of different ways to show that you can respond to music or text or art. You can do that in a video recording. You can do that in a podcast. You can do that in a written essay. You could do that in a blog post online that's more relevant. You could do that in a class presentation. And so it's really all about how can we create a board of options, just like the ice cream board on an ice cream truck, but also at the same time, we are able to create choices for students in order to allow them to meet the standard. Now, sometimes you'll hear, for example, about students need to solve an algebraic equation. So at that point, you're not going to have students doing a poster, but you could ask them, you have an option or a choice to use a math reference sheet, or to do it by hand, or to do it on the computer, or to collaborate with other people, or to use an exemplar, or to first watch something on Khan Academy. And so again, there's always options if we step back and we really think about what it is that we're trying to do. Now, how is this different from differentiated instruction? And so if you look at this scale on the right-hand side of the screen, you're going to see a very static curriculum, and that's traditional education. And that's what we're trying to transform through UDL. So the way that we taught students for a very, very long time was all about how we really started with our curriculum. We started with what it is that we were teaching. And so you sit down, you look in your science textbook, you look at the novels that you're going to teach in ELA, you look at the units that you're going to teach in physical education. As an administrator, you might be looking at, well, I know that I need to teach my staff, about the online grade book, or they need to learn about universal design for learning. And what we do is we kind of plot out the lesson and then we follow it. And the problem with just following it is that it doesn't allow for options and it doesn't allow for choice. It was just, this is the way that we're going to do things, and then everyone has to follow along. And although that was effective for some, it was not effective for all. And what we really need to transform is education has to work for all students. It cannot just work for some students. And what's really interesting is the job of a teacher is to teach all students. It is not to teach the students who arrive ready to learn. And so how do we create an opportunity for all students to access the same options, to make really important choices, and to try to reach the same standards? So we were doing traditional education for a long time, and it worked okay in some ways, because a lot of students who were quote unquote in the margins, in the top 10%, in the bottom 10% in any variability, were educated in another place. We had gifted and talented programs. We had resource rooms. And so a traditional education, although some people may have been bored, most people were able to kind of follow along. And it didn't worry so much about the fact that some people may not be able to access it. That was, of course, until 1990, IDEA, the Individual with Disabilities Education Act, came on the scene. And this required us to react. Suddenly, this curriculum that we had was in no way appropriate for all students. And so what did we do? We started teaching it the way we wanted to teach it, and then would stop and say, uh-oh, this doesn't work for those kids. Okay, what that requires is an aspect of labeling. Even if you read the research on differentiated instruction, you will see that there is a really heavy thread of labeling. In the best differentiated instruction, those labels are very flexible. Those students struggle with this standard. And so I am now going to change something and do something for those students. Now, that's actually a pretty decent way to acquire knowledge. Unfortunately, it's not a great way to learn how to learn, because it's very, very teacher directed. I'm always worrying about the needs of my students and doing something differently for them. And that doesn't teach students how to really self-reflect, to think about what they need, to make a choice, okay, that's self-direction, to think about what's the best choice for me, that's creative problem solving, and then to come up with a product in which they can express what they know. And that's really innovative. And what we do is we call that 21st century skills. So what you're going to basically learn, throughout your whole journey through UDL, is that the purpose of education today is not to have knowledgeable learners. It's to have 21st century students who are knowledgeable, resourceful, self-directed and strategic, and purposeful and motivated. And to do that, we have to be really proactive about thinking about what choices are students going to have from the beginning before they come in. So we're not reacting to them, but we're realizing some students may have trouble reading. Some students may not be able to work on their own. Some students may need a graphic organizer. And then we provide those options to everyone at the same time. And so, how is that, again, how is that different from differentiated instruction? It comes down to what a teacher is doing to direct learning and what a student is doing to direct learning. And so if you think about UDL, what you're looking at is 3 areas of the brain which are absolutely required for learning. And it's the affective network, which is why am I learning this? The recognition network, which is, well, what is it that I need to know? And then lastly, the strategic network of how am I going to use this in a way that's meaningful for my own success. And when you're thinking about what the prompt on the bottom of the screen, which you can't see, is what is your definition of engagement? So take a second and just ponder, if you were to define engagement, what would it be? And a lot of you might be thinking of the words actively participating or fun or involved. Now, interestingly, in the research on UDL, that is not engagement. In order to activate the affective network of the brain, okay, engagement is equal parts attention and commitment. So I'm going to move my video over here so you can really look at these. These are called the UDL guidelines, and this is the principle of to provide multiple means of engagement. And there are 3 guidelines. The first is to recruit student interest. And what you'll notice here is it says choice. Okay, it's not about options. It's not about, oh, well, today we're all doing a poster. That's a fun option, but there's no choice. It's, today I want you to express what you learned about photosynthesis. It could be in a booklet or a poster or an essay or a presentation. That's how you get choices. And that allows students, if you look at the bottom, to be purposeful, like, oh, I want to make that choice, and so I know that I want to do that. But the other part of engagement, which is tricky, is that it also is about sustaining effort and persistence and self-regulating, which means by definition that if it's not hard enough where students have to apply effort, they can't be engaged. So if I walk into your classroom and all students are happily sitting there having fun and making choices, but none of them are being challenged, they are not engaged in their affective network based on the research on UDL and what's happening in the brain. It needs to be hard enough where they're challenged. They need to know the goal, that is the standard. And then again, it says very demands to optimize challenge. Transforming education means that learning is difficult. It is work. And we need to embrace that, because to be successful in life, you have to work hard. Anything that's worth accomplishing, anything we're really proud of accomplishing in our own life, is because we had to overcome something and apply effort to get it. And when we allow students to choose something that's meaningful for them and choose the way that they want to learn something, that's multiple means of representation. You can choose whether you want to watch the video or to sit with me in a lecture or to read this book, okay? And then you can choose how you're going to express it back to me. That's multiple means of action and expression. You set your goal, you create your strategy, you tell me how you're going to meet the standard. When we do that and we have enough challenge by giving them feedback and saying, no, you need to push yourself more, I need more from you, what we're doing is we're setting up, we're priming the affective network for learning. And then lastly, how do students regulate, or how do they cope with that feeling? Because learning is challenging. All students should be challenged. And sometimes when we think about education today, we want students to be comfortable. We want it to be easy. We have to transform that thinking, because if we want them to be successful, they have to be able to set their own goals, chart their own course, and come up with their own strategy. So as you examine the resources, I want you to think about, what is it going to take to transform education in your classroom so students can really start to be creative, self-directed problem solvers who will be really successful in their future.